I'm assuming it's you. I could almost do this face to face because I know who it is. Karina, do you want to send a quick email or do anything to the others? I'll get started. All right, guys. Well, I'm hugely apologise for the delay, but we're going to get started now. I think it was something. I don't think it was to do with my laptop. It's something to do with something very weird with Google. So, oops. And I've just realised. Let me get rid of that so that it's a bit bigger for you. All right. So we're going to get started on how to turn your $1,000 marketing budget into a lifetime of free PR. But before we get started, now that I've had all my technical issues, I'm going to give you some suggestions so that you don't have any. So make sure you switch off your mobile phone and your email so it's not popping up all the way through, and that you haven't got anything else going through your broadband, or otherwise this is going to run very slow for you. Grab a pen and a notepad and let's start talking about it and learning. Are we all systems go, Karina? Great. Okay, so like I said, today's topic is going to be how to turn your $1,000 into a lifetime of free PR. And I guess the rationale behind that is that if you learn the skill, it's a bit like that old saying of don't give someone fishes, teach them how to fish, and then they'll be able to do it for the rest of their life. So it's that kind of reasoning that we've used. Once you learn the skill of how to do PR, you will be able to do it time and time again, every month, every week if you want, of every year until you're fed up doing it, or you can afford to pay someone to do it for you. Also, if you do it if you do it yourself, you'll start to build relationships with the media and they might start to contact you. In fact, I just was interviewing a journalist this morning who said to me that people that ring him after he's published an article or managed to get something up for them, he loves to have a chat with them and then start thinking about how else he can use them in other articles. So once you learn the skill and start contacting the media and build up a bit of a relationship, you're in it for life. It's like riding a bicycle. You'll always be able to do it. So first I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I've been working in PR since 2003, which is when I founded Handle Communications, which was my PR agency. I have now decided to focus just on Handle Your Own PR, so I'm not doing consulting, but that was the reason behind starting Handle Your Own PR, because we had so many small business clients with brilliant, brilliant business ideas who maybe didn't have the money to be able to pay someone to do their publicity for them. And I suddenly thought, well, why don't we just teach you how to do it yourselves? So you're in the right place if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, a retailer who's got a whole lot of products, a service provider, or you've just got one new product or service, or perhaps you're just interested in learning about PR, either to do it for yourself or that you employ a PR agency and you want to know what they're up to. So I'd like you to introduce yourself in the group chat window on the right. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, what your company name is, the industry that you work in, your location, because I'm always interested in knowing where people are coming from. And if you know who your customers are, then tell me who your target market is too. This is just to give me a little feeling for who might be on it, on the webinar, and then I'll try and tailor a few of my examples towards you. But just a little bit of blurb about you would be fabulous. Okay, I'm going to keep going and then we'll come back to you afterwards. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I live in Melbourne, and then in the 90s I went to London and lived there for 5 years. Then came back and moved to Sydney and worked in design, sales, promotion and various other marketing businesses. And then of course came back to Melbourne because I love it, back after the year 2000, and have been here ever since, basically because I've had lots of children. I've got 3 little boys, and that and my businesses have kept me here. So as I said, I've been a PR professional since 2003, and I've worked one-on-one with lots of clients, and I think Ali in the group there knows me quite well. I love it when my clients get their stories published in the media, and I've definitely seen the huge impact PR can make to a business and its potential to grow. So that's what I want to teach you about today. But over the years, I guess, from doing PR, I realized that something was stopping people from using it, and that was because of the perception that it can be really expensive. And of course, if you employ a PR agency, you're really looking at $3 or $4 grand a month. maybe 2.5 if you're lucky. But there is an idea out there that only big companies can afford PR agencies. So I guess I wanted to ask you some questions again. Have you ever had any publicity for your business or product? And then if the answer is no, why? And if the answer is yes, how did it happen? Thank you, Ali and Debbie, for a little bit of background about you. That's great. So you're both in the parenting space. So I might do some parenting examples as we go along. But yeah, so just let me know if you've had publicity and whether it fell in your lap or whether you actually had to go out and get it. I'm going to keep going. So in 2013, we at Handle Your Own PR had a bit of a vision that we should become more active in the area of PR education. Although Handle Your Own PR started in 2009, it took us a while to realise we had more to offer than just ebooks, media contact lists and media release writing, and that actually teaching people was of value as well. But in 2014, we created this new website, which we're continually improving because our vision is to help small businesses get as much publicity as possible. And the core of our business has never changed. That's always what we've wanted to do. We want to be a global leader in the do-it-yourself PR for SMEs around the world. Excuse me. We still sell media contact lists and one-on-one coaching. And this little slide just is giving you a taster for it. But on our website, each of those horizontal bars is a category, and underneath it, we've got a whole lot of media contact lists under various different topics. And I also do some one-on-one coaching, so you can buy an hour of my time to talk with me about your business, and we can talk about angles, or you can do 3 hours where, you know, I'll take you right the way through a whole campaign. And I also do one-on-one coaching right the way from start to finish for anyone who needs it. That's 2,500 that's in there. Ali? Oh, okay, but you're in gift and homewares too now, Ali. Well, that's great because you definitely should be doing your own PR. Okay, so I still teach entrepreneurs and business groups, but mainly I love it when my clients succeed. And I love this picture with a glass of champagne because the truth is I love champagne too. So today, let's get down to the nitty gritty. What are we going to cover off? Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what PR is. Then I'm going to give you some insights into the media, then the steps that are required for running your own campaign, and then we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. And then I'm also going to tell you about our boot camp at the very end to see whether you're interested in learning a little bit more depth. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk to you about the difference between advertising and public relations, and I absolutely love this diagram. I think it really explains it well. Basically, if you buy an ad, then you have to put in your own details and you're basically saying, aren't I great? Isn't this a great company, or isn't my product fantastic? If you get public relations, then the media outlet is basically saying that you're a great company or it's a great product, which of course is so much better, gets out to a load more people, but also it adds that credibility that you're being endorsed by someone. And we all know that somebody recommending something to you is a lot better than just looking at it cold and not being sure whether it's any good or not. So the reality is most small businesses can't afford to advertise other than maybe the odd ad in a publication or two, or maybe something in the local media, because advertising is expensive. And I just thought we would cover off, just to give you an example of the sort of money that you could save by getting editorial rather than doing advertising. The Australian Financial Review charges $2,200 for a 10x2, which is about the size of a packet of cigarettes or a bit smaller. And their casual rates are $13,000 for a quarter-page strip. So that gives you an idea, and that'll be the same for the Sydney Morning Herald. The Woman's Weekly, which is a bit of a holy grail for people, is nearly $20,000 for a third of a page. So it's a very expensive magazine, well worth getting a little story in there. And even Mother and Baby magazine charges $3,500 per third a page. So it's really expensive to advertise, bearing in mind that advertising really only works if you repeat a lot of the time. So to do that, it starts to become incredibly costly. So I guess what I'd like now is just to find out what you think publicity is or what you think PR is. So if you can just stick that in the chat box, I will have a look at it. But because we're running behind time, I'm also going to just keep going and I'll come back and have a look at those afterwards. So what PR is basically publicity, and they are the same thing. Some people ask me what the difference is. There is no difference. It's exactly the same thing. It's about getting your story into the media. And the media can be newspapers, TV, radio, blogs, all sorts of things. PR means that you offer a story or a story idea to a journalist as content for them to publish. It's essentially free, as in you don't pay for it. But the drawback is that you can't always control when it will appear. So there is a little bit of give and take there with PR. You can, if you understand how the lead times work, control it a little bit better, and I'm going to explain that later on. But to a certain extent, it's out of your hands. And why would anyone use PR? Well, basically because editorial is much more believable than ads. In the end, you don't buy magazines or newspapers for the ads. Same with radio and TV, you do it for the content. So that is what journalists are charged with. They have to come up with the content. And if you can feed them some information that will allow them to create some content, then they're going to love you. And of course, as I said earlier, with PR, you don't pay the media outlet for the coverage. So I just thought I'd give you a couple of case studies. I think, girls, you might quite like this one. I do. There were a couple of Melbourne women who live out in the burbs who decided that they wanted to set up an escort service for other women. I think it was around the time Ashley Madison first launched here, and they thought, why is it all about blokes? And let's do something for women. So they had almost no money by the time they opened their doors. And they thought that they would try a bit of DIY PR to create awareness. Now, the other thing these women wanted was their names to be kept secret. They really didn't want anyone in the school run or anyone else to know what they were up to. So it was a difficult sell in the first place. I was chatting with them and thought, you know, maybe a current affair would pick it up because, you know, how they do those people in silhouette with distorted voices, but a current affair were horrified and said, what kind of a program do you think we are that we'd do a story like that? So it was quite funny. So the media release title that we used for them was Two Melbourne Mums Take on the Sex Industry, which certainly was of interest, but as I said, it was a bit of a slog. They approached the women's media and the Victorian metro media because they were based in Melbourne. And many outlets rejected the story, but good on them. They kept on going because the whole thing with PR is not to take rejection to heart. And they managed to they ended up getting a 3-page story in Grazia magazine, which unfortunately has closed now, but Grazia was a beautiful glossy magazine. And Grazia did them 3 pages, which if they had paid for the advertising space would have cost them $18,000. So it was $6,000 a page. Now, as you'll see from the slide, this was the article that was written. It was a fantastic article and really worked well for them. And I love their little opening paragraph. When others are starting cupcake businesses or parenting blogs, two Melbourne mums are running a very different kind of company, an escort service for neighbourhood women. So great story, bit of a hook. It was a bit of a hard sell at first, but they certainly got their money's worth in the end. So now I just want to talk to you a little bit about the skills that you're going to need if you are going to do your own PR. So the first one is that you need to have reasonable writing skills. And by what I mean by that is that you understand good grammar and that you can spell. Bearing in mind that journalists spend all their time on their computer writing and dealing with people who are writing to them, the last thing they want is spelling mistakes and bad grammar. If you are unable to do that for yourself or you feel a little bit insecure about it, then you can pay someone to write a good media release for you. And we do have that service on our site for $350, but you also would probably be able to find people online. But definitely worth getting someone else to write it if you don't think your writing's up to scratch. And the other thing you need is an approachable phone manner, mainly because journalists may want to ask further questions on the phone or even do a formal interview with you. And if you don't want to talk to the media yourself, you might want to find somebody who is relevant to the business, but who is prepared to talk on your behalf. because even if they don't interview you, you're not going anywhere near TV or radio, they're still going to want to interview you probably over the phone. Here's another quick case study that I thought you might like. This is a woman who decided that she'd never, that she wanted to, that I think she'd just had a wedding, but anyway, she had wedding dresses and bridesmaid dresses and you name it, all left over. So she thought, hang on, people could start selling these to other brides who maybe want to do a slightly cheaper wedding. And so she created Upcycled Bride. She'd never done PR before, but she really, really wanted to get on TV. So she approached the women's media and she bought the TV producers media list on the Handle Your Own PR website, which contains contacts for most of the morning shows and some lifestyle shows. I've just bumped it up by another 20 names just this week. But anyway, so she went out there with her Upcycled Bride and they all loved it, which of course, you can never really tell whether the journalists are going to go for it or not. But in this instance, they all went for it. She managed to get a segment on Channel 9 on mornings and had huge interest from the studio, Weekend Today and The Project. So needless to say, she's a huge fan of Handle Your Own PR and her business is now booming. In fact, I'm talking to her later this afternoon because she's about to do another campaign. So that's just a little bit about what PR is. Now let's talk about the media. So there are various different types of media. And I just thought I'd run through them with you quickly. Some of them more obvious than others. TV obviously is the holy grail, but in order to go on TV, you need a visual angle or you need a person that can be interviewed. For radio, radio is absolutely perfect if you have someone to be interviewed. So obviously there's not much else, there's no visual with it, so it's all about talking. With magazines, they're perfect for products or for advice for readers. And there's different types of magazines. Obviously, there's the parenting media where they're always looking for advice. And the parenting media are also very good at featuring products, new products on the market and mumpreneur products. With newspapers, you do need to have a newsworthy angle. So they're not going to do, well, they're not as likely to do a light and fluffy piece. They really want to have something a bit more chunky in there. And they also will be looking for a local angle. Now, if it's a metropolitan newspaper, it doesn't really matter. As long as you are in that state somewhere or your business is based in that state, that's fine. With a local paper, they're going to want you to live within their local catchment area. But you do need to think about newspaper headlines and pitch accordingly, knowing that there needs to be a bit of a newsworthy angle. Bloggers these days are pretty much like any other media outlet, but you just want to target the ones with large followings. And then you just treat them like journalists. So you email them the media release, you follow up, and you give them all the information that you can and offer them a sample, etc., etc. We're going to talk all about that when we get into the nitty-gritty of how to run a campaign. And last but not least, and definitely not least, email newsletters and industry media. So even though a lot of people would discount them and say, oh, but it's only a newsletter, newsletters and industry media are highly targeted. So you may not get as many people, but you'll probably get a lot of the ones that you're specifically targeting. So, I mean, if you're targeting childcare centres, there are childcare magazines. If you're targeting banking, there's banking magazines and newspapers. And even places like KidSpot and Babyology and things like that have email newsletters where they're happy to do giveaways and they often do little stories as well. So really, they are a really viable option and definitely not to be discounted. Now, the different media have different what they call lead times, which means that they are working a certain amount of time ahead in order to stay on top of the workload. And that has an effect on how soon, well, I guess the timing in terms of when you should pitch to them. So when we talk about the lead times, I'm talking about how quickly they might get your story up. So blogs and websites and other social sites are pretty much looking for content constantly and they upload it onto their sites daily. So, I mean, I've been known to send a media release to an online business or website and they might put it up within an hour or so. So that can be very, very quick. And the same with bloggers. As long as you've given them enough information, they may well put it up that day. Daily newspapers tend to work between a day and a week ahead. a week ahead for any features or, you know, the weekend papers, that kind of thing. The daily newspapers tend to start work in the morning and they've got to put out a newspaper at the end of the day. So they can be very, very quick and you can get coverage maybe the next day. Weekly newspapers, which I guess is mainly local papers, but they tend to work a couple of weeks ahead. So, for instance, my local paper comes out on a Thursday, which means that any editorial you're submitting needs to be finalised by the previous Friday, because they then go to print, I think, on the Monday morning. So you just need to be aware of the timings that they have. But if you want a story in your local paper, you need to approach them a couple of weeks before you want it to appear. Radio, like daily newspapers, can be very, very quick. They could even turn it around on the same day or within a couple of days. There is no point pitching anything to radio, I would think, more than a week out, because they'll just forget it and you'll have to repitch anyway. Weekly magazines like Woman's Day and New Idea and other weekly magazines tend to work about 6 weeks ahead. Some of the smaller ones might be 3 weeks, but most of them are 6 weeks at least. So if you were to approach New Idea or Women's Day now, I would think you've missed Valentine's. You're probably on the way towards their Easter issues already. Monthly magazines tend to work 2 to 3 months ahead, sometimes 4 months ahead. I was just talking to the editor, or one of the features editor for Virgin Voyeur this morning. That's the in-flight magazine for Virgin, and he said they're already working on the March issue and starting to think about the April issue. And here we are in January or the beginning of February. And bi-monthly or quarterly magazines, which are bi-monthly, weirdly, even though it means 2 every month, is the term people use for a magazine every 2 months, or quarterly magazines every quarter. They tend to work 3, 6, maybe even 9 months ahead. So you really need to pitch well ahead for that. So for instance, if you were going to a quarterly magazine now, you might be wanting to pitch spring stuff or something to do with spring. I would think that, in fact, I have been working on a quarterly magazine recently, and I know that they're probably working on the June issue at the moment. So that just means, I guess what you need to know is that if you pitch to a journalist and they say, yep, I love it, I'm going to put it in the next issue, that next issue might be quite a way away if you're not aware of the lead times. But you can always ask a journalist anyway when that actual issue comes out. So my next question for you that I'd love you to answer in the chat box is, what media are you trying to target? What do you want? Where do you want to see your story appear? I'm just having a quick look at your messages, just in case there's anything I should comment on. All right, so let's now talk about the steps required for running your own PR campaign. So there are 3 steps, basically, with lots of little steps underneath them. One is that you've got to get all the stuff that you need together first, so we call that getting ready. Then you're doing it, so you're actually sending it out to journalists. And then there's the post-PR process, and we'll talk a little bit about what to do once you've actually got a clipping. But what do you need to get started? So the first thing that you need is a company logo or a product logo, or just some kind of a logo that goes in the heading of in the header part of your media release. It's a little bit like doing it on letterhead, but the journalist will look up the top to find out what the business is that is being promoted. Then you need some sample products or trials ready to go. Most journalists will want to touch and feel products. And if you've got a service-based business, they might want to try it. So you really need to set some aside. And for me, if I was doing a big campaign, I'd probably try and set aside about 20 samples so that you can send that out to journalists upon request. I don't ever send out unsolicited ones. Don't bother sending them out as a big package, because it may well end up as someone's daughter's or you know, the journalist next to them, or somebody takes it home. You also need to include the details for where to purchase. And if you've got a lot of them and it's retailers, you might just want to have a list of stockists on your website. But the readers or audience of a story that's been written about you are going to go straight to your website. Which leads me perfectly into the next one, which is that your website needs to be live and ready for scrutiny, because that is the first place the journalist and their readers or audience are going to go. Then you need to have some time set aside, and I would roughly suggest about a day to get started, and then 1 to 3 hours a week. And then, of course, the most importantly, you need to be prepared to put in the effort, and you need to be motivated. And I can't stress that enough, because really that's the mind game that you need to play with yourself to actually get started. So now we're going to talk about photography, and good photography is key to any PR campaign, really. So obviously you need to show people. Your photography needs to be really good. It's worth employing a professional to do them. You want to show people what the product looks like, and ideally what the product looks like when it's being used. And this means really gorgeous images. In fact, we've had people who, and media outlets that have just picked up a story because the shots are so gorgeous. And if you don't have images, or you don't have a product to sell, then it's always worth having a pic of the founders that you send out to the media as well. Mainly, Handle Your Own PR got a couple of stories at the launch purely because we had good photography that had been done. It really can make the difference as to whether they're even going to run the story or not. If you have a product or you're in fashion, then it goes without saying that your images need to be stunning. And again, I can only reiterate, use a professional. It'll be worth it in the long run, and you'll be able to use the shots for lots of other things as well. So there are 3 types of images that you need to have ready. The first one is a straight product shot. A product shot is basically a shot of what the product's going to look like in its packaging. So how it might look like on a shop shelf if someone went in to look for it. The next kind of shot is deep etched, and deep etched just means it's been cut out of the background. So you have your product on a white background, and I'm sure all of you have seen the sort of hot products and cool product sections in magazines and newspapers, where they often feature products that have been deep etched. And then you also need a lifestyle shot, and a lifestyle shot shows your product or service being used. So it shows it in use. So for instance, this is my own product, baby sticky bowl. You can see it in the packaging. Oops, I'm moving it. I've got a touch screen. So baby sticky bowl, you can see in the packaging. Then you can see it just as a product on its own. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the little baby using it and not flinging their bowl across the room. So let's talk about samples. Samples are key if you have a product, as I said, because the journalist or producer will probably want to get it so they can see and touch it. If it's going on TV, they want to be able to show their viewers. And you really need to make sure that you allocate some samples to send out to the media after your initial approach, and only if they show interest. So it used to be in the olden days, you'd make up a beautiful press kit that might cost you 30 or 40 bucks or more per journalist, and send them out and distribute them, courier them out to various journalists. I would recommend that you don't do that. It's a very costly exercise to do. It would be a much better idea to write a media release, send out an email to a whole lot of journalists offering them a sample, and then when they say they're interested, send them one. Then you're much more likely, then you have an idea of who's going to run the story, firstly. Secondly, you won't use anywhere near as many samples, and the journalists that are going to actually run a story are going to be the ones who receive it. Don't expect to get your samples back unless they're of high value. It is pretty much the norm that journalists get sent things and then they get to keep it. So don't expect to get it back unless, as I said, it's a very high value. But if you do want to get it back, then make it easy for the journalist to get it back to you. So by that I say, do a stamped addressed envelope, or a pre-filled out express post bag, or a pre-filled out courier slip, so that the journalist can just very easily get it back to you. Bearing in mind that if they're using it for a photo shoot, they might have like a couple, 50 or 100 different items, and it's very hard for them to keep track of who belongs to what. If it is a high cost item, so for instance, I've done a whole lot of PR on prams before, and at $1,500, you don't want to hand those out to all the journalists. So what we did was we had one sample that we sent out to different media to road test. So for instance, we would send it to KidSpot, they would have someone review it, then we would give them another address and they'd send it off to a different media outlet who would also review it. or you can get it sent back to you and then you send it out again with a media release or whatever. But that is one thing where you have one high value product and you send it round to a whole lot of people to use and try it out. Okay, so next we've got to talk about writing a great media release. So all media releases need to be attention grabbing and have a well constructed. Really, I should have written in here top paragraph. Your first paragraph is absolutely key to whether they're going to read any further or not. So you want your heading to be really exciting. You need the email subject heading to also be exciting. And I often say to people, use the heading you've used for your release. And then in that first paragraph, you just want to hit them with it. So ideally, a media release is about a page. If it's a product, it only needs a page. If it's a business or you're looking for more of a feature story, you might need to do a couple of pages, but it would never, ever be more than 2 pages. You need to clearly communicate your key messages and write your media releases if it's already appearing in the magazine or newspapers. So you write it for the end reader or watcher. Which means that if you're talking about you're not talking about the journalist, you're talking about the person who's reading it in a magazine. And when you're sending out your media release, I always would suggest that you send a photo with it as well, because we cut and paste our media releases into the body of the email, just one less click for a journalist. But make sure that your photograph is low res, because if you clog up their inbox, they'll just delete it. So that's my thing. And then make sure that you cover all the following points in every media release: what it is that you're selling, why you're selling it or what problem it solves, where it's available, and what the cost is. So there's no point, telling people all about this great product and you've forgotten to say where it is that people can buy it or how much it costs. What not to include in a media release or a media release or a media pitch, any ads at all. Journalists see themselves as being very, very separate from the advertising department. If you send them an ad or your media release sounds like an ad, they will just ditch it straight away, or even worse, they'll refer you to the advertising department, and then you're going to have advertising reps hounding you for the next month or so. So no ads go to journalists. No clippings from other media. I don't mind. It doesn't matter how well someone might have explained your business or what great story they may have written. If you send another clipping to a journalist from another media outlet, they're just going to consider the story's old, it's already been covered, and they're not going to do it. So whatever media coverage you have, keep it to yourself. There's no point telling them, because it may colour their judgment against you. There's also no point including logos other than the one in the heading, obviously. Trademarks, copyright symbols, any of those kind of things are just a waste of time. I'm sure if you think about any article that you've ever read in a magazine or a newspaper, you never see the little R or the little TM there. So don't bother putting it in your media release. Don't bother including any customer testimonials unless they're from someone with a really high profile. I think we all know that you can get just about anyone to write a good testimonial for you if you need to, and so they're just not going to look at it unless obviously it's a celebrity or someone with a high profile in your industry. And don't bother using jargon or slang unless it's particularly appropriate. You want to really write your media release like you're trying to explain the idea of it to your best friend or to your mother, somebody who you just need to speak in very, very simple terms in a conversational tone. So you don't impress anybody by putting a whole lot of jargon into a media release. I would say the only exception really that I can think of would be technology kind of things, because there is a lot of jargon in that industry and acronyms. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about newsworthy angles. Now, I'm only covering a few of them today because we've got a time limit. But on my website, I have got a list of a whole lot more. And if you go online, you'll be able to find them as well. But some of the angles that work really well, if a product is new or brand new, that in itself may be enough of an angle. If it's really innovative, that makes it really stand out. And journalists are always looking for something new and exciting to cover. So new is good. Is it topical? Does it relate to a popular TV show? Is it something that they would use in maybe I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here? Or Is it a weight loss product that they might use on Biggest Loser? Or, you know, is there something that you can tie it into something in the news at the moment? Maybe it's something about, you know, even though it's summer, we're getting freezing cold weather, so try our faux mink blankets for your child, or whatever. If you've got a celebrity angle, then obviously you should try and use it, but be very careful. Unless you have got the permission of the celebrity, you can't use their name. And that includes, even if you've sent them a sample and they've sent back a thank you note saying thank you very much, you still need to ask their permission before you go out there saying, you know, Kate Blanchett uses my stroller, or, you know, whatever it might be. So just be very careful with celebrities. We used Lauren Newton to promote, that's Bert Newton's daughter, to promote a stroller when, well, it was actually, we gave her a whole heap of stuff when her first baby was born. I mean, and we're talking new pram, new stroller, clothes, booties, you know, everything. And when we managed to secure an interview in Women's Day and went back to her to say, could she do it? She asked for $5,000. So that'll give you an idea of the sort of money they get for doing one interview. Maybe your angle could be that you have an interesting backstory. Have you changed careers? Was there a life-changing moment that you suddenly decided to ditch one career and pick up another one, or that you saw a product and it was relevant to you in some particular way? Is there an unusual link? I love this one. Are you like a bald hairdresser? Are you a Japanese running an Indian restaurant? Are you a short person, you know, selling tall people's clothing? If there's a funny little link like that, then that's definitely worth exploiting and getting out in a media release. I've also touched on innovation, but if it is something that's innovative or along with new, that always works really well. But one of the strongest ways that you can go out to the media is to offer tips or advice. So it positions you as an expert. You don't, when I say tips and advice, that doesn't mean that you have to have a degree in something. It just means that you've got experience in a particular area, and you can offer it. For instance, we were working with a company that sold beds, and we created a media release that were tips on different bedding for different mattresses for different ways of sleeping, and it worked really, really well. So tips and advice can be great. And another great story that I love this one too, we had a client who it was just a friend of ours who was a picture framer in Melbourne, and obviously pretty hard to get your local picture framer into the media. But what we did was we got him to write 10 tips about where, you know, hanging pictures and where you can hang them and how to do it and all that sort of thing, and entitled the media release, Are You Well Hung? And I have to say, he got heaps of articles. I mean, seriously, maybe 30 or 40 articles. So always good to do something that's a bit funny or humorous. I think it kind of makes things a bit lighter for the journalists. Okay, so now we've talked about getting ready, we're going to talk about doing it. So the first thing that we want to talk about is media contacts, because once you've got your media release written, you then need someone to send it to. So there are two ways of buying a media or creating a media contact list. You can either create it yourself or you can buy one. If you create it yourself, I just want to give you some hints for those that maybe can't afford to buy. Firstly, you need to do a bit of research, so Google will become your friend. You need to note the names of journalists and their contact details. Research recent articles or stories in the media that you're targeting. Once you've got the journalist details, you can ring the media outlet, or you can potentially find it on Google. I know News Limited, so news.com.au, often put the email address of the journalist that wrote an article in as the byline. It's sort of live to be able to email them, but a lot of other places won't. So you may need to ring the media outlet. Most of the reception desks at any media outlet will be happy to give you someone's email address if you ask. Otherwise, you're going to have to get onto Google and see if you can find it there. So all of this is very possible. It just takes some time, but it's absolutely free, and that is definitely one of the options. The other option, if you have a little bit of money and you don't need very much, would be to buy a media list. And buying a quality up-to-date media list ensures that your media release will reach interested journalists. It also, now I guess I should say in this that we do have media lists for sale. And with our media list, we actually contact the journalists every 3 months to ask them if they're interested in being contacted by non-professionals. If they don't want to be, then we take them off our list. So our lists aren't exhaustive in that they have everyone in them, because some people have asked to be taken off, but they are definitely, the ones that are there are the ones that will be interested to hear from you. The other benefit of having up-to-date media list is that you will have the personalised email addresses for most of the media outlets listed. So that means it says Mary at, or John at, or Trevor at, or whatever, rather than editorial at or info at. So we've actually got people's names and phone numbers in there. And obviously you'll save yourself hours and hours of time and aggravation if you do it yourself. Most of our media contact lists sell for under $250. We've got some that are really cheap. I think we've got one on there for $50. The most expensive one is the TV producers one, which is $350, but it's 25 producers' names. So there's a big variety on the site of different people that you can try. And of course, the other huge benefit to buying a media list is that you can get started straight away. So you could start doing your PR campaign today. Okay, now there's different ways that you need to approach different types of media. With magazine editors and web editors and bloggers, you should always email them first. They don't like to be rung very often. So email is the way to go for those. And with web editors and bloggers, you often can't even find a phone number. However, news editors and radio and TV producers all like to be rung first. So they want you to ring. And of course, the first thing you do if you ring is say, is this a good time, to check that they're not on deadline. But then you ring them and give them, you probably have, I don't know, somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes to get your story idea across to them. And then if they like the idea, they will, they'll ask you for more information. And that's when you email them some information and they're actually looking out for it, which is great. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the email that goes out with your media release. So you've written your media release. We normally cut and paste it, put it into the body of the email with a low-res image. And then you need a little email intro that's going to go with it. So the first thing to do with your email is to make sure that your subject line is quite catchy. I actually have had a Handle Your Own PR customer say, is it all right to say pitch to Herald Sun if it's for the Herald Sun? And I was like, well, would you open up something that said that? So no, you really, I mean, if you're stuck, use the heading that you've come up with for your media release, because you probably put a bit of time into thinking about something that works. Always send them a personalized email. Nobody likes to be BCC'd into anything. So you really need to send it to Mary and say, hi, Mary. Excuse me. Only send to one person per media outlet at a time if you're offering an exclusive. So if you've got 2 or 3 names for a newspaper, choose the one that you think is most appropriate first. And then if they don't want it or don't answer, then you can move on to the next one. And if you are going to send it to more than one, then make it obvious. So if I'm sending it to a couple because I really don't know who is the best person to send it to, I might send it to Mary and Joe, who are both TV producers. I would write on the email, hi, Mary and Joe. I wasn't sure who to send this to, so I'm sending it to both of you, blah, blah, blah. So you're not being underhanded about it. I always copy and paste the release into the body of the email as well as attaching it. You can do it instead of, but it's all about making it super easy for the journalist to open it and see straight away what it is that you're doing or trying to sell them. A low resolution version of your image should sit top and center of the email, which I've already mentioned, so we don't clog up the inbox. And just explain the pitch and say that you've got some samples or a trial, or if you've got a person to be interviewed, you can tell them a little bit about that. If you've got any statistics that support your story, then they can approach you for the statistics, and of course offer them high-res images if they need them, because if they're doing anything in print, they're going to need something that's reasonably high resolution. So once you've sent it all out, the next thing that you need to do is what they call follow-up, which is the industry term for going back to the journalist that you've already sent your email to and checking that they've received it and that hopefully that they're going to print it. So this can be one of the most crucial parts of the campaign. Remember that journalists and editors receive hundreds of emails every day. So you really need to remind them. I mean, even if they've got the best of intention and they love your media release, they might just sort of put it out and leave it in the unsent or flag it. But then it's so easy for them to forget because they get so many more the next day. So don't ever feel bad about ringing a journalist and saying, I'm just checking that you saw my media release. They may not have it all. I've had a lot of them say to me, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you contacted me. Can you please send it again? I've lost it, or I did want to do a story and I forgot about it. Remember to send a follow-up email normally within a week. So when I say a week, I'd say a business week. So within 4 or 5 days, just because otherwise it's all going to go cold and you're going to have to basically repitch the whole thing. Make sure you personalize it again. So what I tend to do is I take the email that I've sent them originally and I forward it and send it back to them saying, just checking you received this. Was there any interest? Or I might call them, but I like to send the original email so they can see that I did send it and that there is a bit of a time lag as well. Okay, so let's assume that you have done your PR and you've done your follow-up. Now we're going to talk about what you can do after the story's been written. So the first thing that you want to do is thank any journalists or editors who give you a mention, mainly because nobody ever does. And that way you'll really stand out. And the interview I was having with the journalist this morning, he said to me, you know, I love it when people call me back, not because I want the thank you, because it then gives me an opportunity to talk to them a bit more and we can explore other ways that I could use them. And it also builds up that rapport and that relationship so that you can call on them when you really need a story the next time. So always worth saying a thank you. Well, I mean, it is in all aspects of life, but it definitely is with journalists as well, because hardly anyone ever thinks to thank them. And in fact, one journalist from BRW once said to me, he said, I find it amazing that everyone is all over me like a rash and ringing me and emailing me all the time until I tell them that I am running a story. And then I often never hear from them again. So it's a bit of a thankless task, and you can stand out if you're going to be somebody that that says thank you to them. So now we're going to talk about clippings, which is really the industry term again for a copy of whatever coverage you receive. If you imagine, it really comes from clipping out articles in newspapers back in the olden days with scissors. But it's still, we still refer to them as clippings. Always ask for a copy of an interview or an article if it's been written for you or about you. But then once it's been done, ask if you're going to be, if it's okay if you use it for social media or on your website. Don't assume. Some media outlets really don't like it and they would rather that you just used a link. So don't go taking photos and plastering it all over social media until you've double checked that that's all right. But however, having said that, and most magazine editors will give you clippings, as will a radio producer. They're normally quite happy to send you a copy of the interview. It's normally the daily newspapers that don't. They kind of go, I'll tell you what day it's going to appear and make sure that you buy it. If it's in another state, you can normally ring the front desk for most newspaper outlets and they have back copies, back issues that they'll sell you. But they will often allow you to feature a link to it because it drives traffic to their website as well, which they love. Well, we all love, I guess. So, I don't know whether my funny little, I'm not sure what I've done here. All right, so the other way, there are a whole lot of other ways you can make media coverage work harder for you. And again, if we were to talk about the difference between advertising, what do you do with an ad once it's run? I mean, you've got the artwork and that's great, but you're unlikely to put it out on social media and get everybody to read it going, woohoo, look at this, this is the artwork for our ad. People want to read stories. So once you've got a story written, there's a whole lot you can do with it. You can put it on your website, obviously, in a media section or on the front page even. You can put it out through your social media channels. And I mean, I'm always putting things out through Facebook, but Twitter is another great one. Feature it in your blog with a link, maybe include it in a newsletter out to your customers to let them know that you've received more coverage. And definitely let your business network know, so any sales staff or colleagues that you might have. It's always, or maybe you do a business newsletter. You want to put it in that. And then last but not least, if you've got a shop or an office and there's some space, then why not laminate it and put it up actually in the shop? And I mean, we've all been to restaurants where they put their reviews up on the window and we all read them eagerly to find out what's going on. Please excuse my dog in the background. So that's just another way that you can do it to get exposure. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about SEO, because PR is absolutely fantastic for SEO. SEO, for those of you that don't know, is search engine optimization. And Google absolutely loves media coverage with links coming back into your website. It considers most media outlets as very high reputable sites because they have a lot of traffic on them. So yeah, I mean, articles that have been written for me in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age are still appearing on the first or second page if I Google handle your own PR. And the more popular the media outlet, the better it'll work for you. So for instance, something like The Age or Sydney Morning Herald, the Courier Mail, one of those ones are ranked really, really highly by Google. The trick for that is to make sure that you get the web address of your business in an article rather than just the business name. So the last time I was interviewed by a journalist, I actually said to them, instead of writing handle your own PR as separate words, would you mind writing www.handleyourownpr.com.au? They had no problem with that at all. And sure enough, even though it was an article that wasn't particularly relevant to handle your own PR, I was just trying to get some media exposure anyway. It's still ranked in the Google rankings quite quickly. So always good to get your web address in rather than the name, just the name of your business. So we've got some time now for any questions, if anyone has any questions. While you're writing them, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our boot camp, because for anyone that is a little bit unsure of themselves, I think the boot camp is absolutely the way to go. And basically, I guess what I'm saying in this slide is that we at Handle Your Own PR realize we still have a long way to go, because offering media lists and online tips has only solved part of the problem. The journey is still way too daunting for some people to take alone, and they're quite unnerved by the idea of contacting journalists, or they don't know what media to go to, or you might not know who your niche market is, whatever. So, and there are limits to what I can achieve by holding lectures or even doing a 1-hour webinar. There's just not enough time for me to cover through the detail that you're going to need. And also then you have people that love the idea when they're in the class but don't actually get around to it afterwards. Obviously, there's no support group for you to talk to people, although obviously you could go on the Handle Your Own PR Facebook page, but there's no real group of you doing it at the same time to talk to each other. And geographically, if you're going to go to a lecture, you need to live nearby. So that presents yet another limitation. So what we thought the solution was to start running a Handle Your Own PR boot camp. So we've got one, we've done a couple now, and they've just been great. And almost everyone who has been on the boot camp has loved it, learned a lot, and managed to get a whole lot of media coverage. So I just wanted to run through with you what's involved and what the cost is, because I'd love to have you on my next boot camp. So the boot camp consists of 6 weekly 90-minute live webinar sessions. In the sessions, I cover off all sorts of things that we've talked about today, but in a lot more depth, about how to create the right angle. What other things? I'm just trying to think what other things we cover off. How to write a media release, what you need to put together, how to write your bio, the best way to approach journalists. I'll help you massage your media release and massage the email that goes out with them. And then during the course, you actually do your own PR. So then we can start talking about how to follow up and how to react to some of the follow-up responses. So I go through loads with you. Plus, of course, the benefit of the live webinar is that you get to ask questions as you do now, in that you can put anything you like in the chat window and I will address it. The other things that we're including in the boot camp is access to all the training materials that are presented during each session. And what we actually do is we record them So they're left in what we call an ever webinar, but you're able to go back and look at it at any time during the 6 weeks, and recap on what it is that I was talking about. You also get access to all the key ebooks that we have available in our online store, and there's some beauties in there. There's a great one, how to do a killer interview, where I got a journalist who specializes in live interviews to write a 15-page booklet on 10 tips for when you're doing a media interview. But I've got a whole lot of other stuff in there as well. On the bootcamp, we are also going to practice and learn on your own business or product. So by the end of it, you will have the media release and the angles and an idea about how maybe to do 12 months worth of publicity, all based on your own business or your own product. At the end of each weekly class, I give you some exercises to do, all relevant to building up your PR kit, I guess. Plus, we also have a closed Facebook group where you can post images if you want people to, if you want me or any of your fellow boot campers to critique any photos that you might have done, taglines, intros, bio. We do all of that in the closed Facebook group, and it's great. And for all of that, so all of that I think is worth roughly $3,500. We give you the whole lot for only $800 plus GST. So it really is a bargain. And if you think, you know, of how much coverage you should be able to get and how much you might pay, you probably pay 3 times that for just one ad. And this is actually going to allow you to be able to do PR for the rest of your life. We also are doing a bonus offer for today's bootcamp, and lucky for you, an awful lot of people have left. So for the ones that are left, the first person to sign up is going to get a free one-on-one 1-hour session with me about your own business, and we'll discuss what you want the PR to achieve, what media angles you've got and whether they're appropriate, and what other ones we can think of, and you know, the target markets. Also, I'll answer any of your questions. It's just you and me one-on-one. You tell me what your problems are and I'll help you solve them. For anybody else who signs up today, so if you're not the first one, you're still going to get 40% off a one-on-one session with me. So they're normally $250, but you can have it for $150. So that is probably really worth being a bolt-on. We found in the boot camps that we've done so far that everyone wants to talk to me in the end about their own business before they, you know, start sending it out. Now, the other bonus is that our usual bootcamp price is $800, but for today we're going to allow you to have it for only $600. So $600 for 6 weeks plus an hour of my time, plus the e-workbooks, plus the closed group. I mean, it's an absolute bargain. $100 a week pretty much, and you'll be able to do PR like a pro. So if you're interested in doing it, what you do is you click. Karina, have you posted up a link? Karina has posted up a link for you. Click on the link and it'll take you straight through to the shopping cart, and use BC0216 as the code. And just so you can remember it, we created it by Bootcamp on the 2nd of 02, so February 2016. But BC0216 at the checkout, and you'll get the bootcamp for only $600 today only. And there's even more. So what we're going to do is, if you sign up today, then I'm going to give you a free media contact list of your choice when we get to that stage on the bootcamp, and then 20% off any additional media contact lists that you want to use. As I said earlier, we've got over 80 media contact lists on the website, everything from beauty to parenting blogs to parenting media to fashion to business media to, you know, you name it, we've got it on there. And all our journalists have been asked if they want to hear from you, and they do. So they're not just, it's not just a download of like a yellow pages list. These are kind of semi-qualified for you. Yep, so you heard right. If you sign up today, then instead of paying $3,735, you can get everything that we've mentioned for only $600. So please join us. I'd love you to come on board, and I'd love to be able to help you get all your own publicity. So I'm just going to leave this slide on here while I have a quick look at any of your comments. Debbie, we have a blog on our site that currently offers lots of the tips and advice you talked about. Is it worth reformatting some of the more popular ones into a press release? Yes and no, Debbie. Okay, so this is the way that the media these days looks at something that's been posted in a blog as having been published. I think mainly because Google will look, if it's the same wording, Google will look at it and say it's already been done and it doesn't give them any ratings. So what I suggest that you do is rewrite them. Take the tips that you like, but rewrite them, reword them so that they don't look exactly the same. And the other thing is, remember, journalists will be going onto your site to see what's on there. So if they see the same article that you've sent them on your blog, then they're not going to use it. So my hint for you is to rewrite it, or what I normally say to people is don't post it on your blog, use it as a media release. So when you've got the next lot of tips, don't put it on the blog, put it into a media release, send it out to all the journalists. If they don't use it, then put it on your blog later. And if they do use it, then use the link, which will be fantastic for your SEO and also gives you credibility. And you can still say to people, look at this great article that we got published, but you just put the link instead. All right, so I would love you to join us. Please come on board. This is what one of the girls who did the recent boot camp said. She has a business called Turkish Murkish, which is selling Turkish type towels. And she put this on our Facebook page, and I thought it was so beautiful. I wanted to share it with you. So she just said, attending Handle Your Own PR has been the best thing I've done for my business. Jules and Karina give you all the tools you need to get started. I recommend this bootcamp to anyone who wants to understand how the media works and how to get your brand out there yourself. And she actually had tried doing PR before, and I think her media releases had been way too commercial, so she couldn't get anything picked up. Since she's finished the bootcamp, what would you say, Karina? She's definitely got TV and 4 or 5 articles. She's got a big feature in Rush magazine. And she's just on fire. She's still going. Every day she's posting another thing up in our closed group. So that could be you if you do this boot camp with us. So I'm going to sign off in a minute, but just make a note of the discount code BC0216, BC0216 at the checkout to get it for $600. All right. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I will look forward to seeing you on the boot camp, hopefully. So thanks for everyone for coming, and we'll see you again soon.